do you want to go ahead and start that? Wonderful. Welcome, everyone, to the January 17th meeting of the Cascade Speakeasy Toastmasters meeting. Tonight, we have a wonderful agenda. However, tonight, I would like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone would focus on my screen and repeat along with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I forgot to tell everyone to mute themselves. My apologies. I think we made it through that okay. I would now like to introduce our Toastmaster for this evening. Please welcome Brian Brett.
Well, good evening, fellow Toastmasters. Sorry I wasn't muted for the Pledge of Allegiance there. I don't see, let me scroll through the screen here, any new guests. Are there any new guests tonight? Does not look like that from my phone. I will move on to introducing the General Evaluator, which is Mr. Eric Stepper.
And Brian, before you do that, we do have one change to your agenda. Selena's not going to be with us this evening, so Pat Whitfield is going to take over as the odd counter.
Copy, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Does anybody have a joke for the day? Then you got to put up with one of mine. Which rock group has 4 guys who can't sing or play instruments?
The Rolling Stones.
Did you forget where you were?
Not good guess, Rolling Stones, but no.
Could you ask the question again, Eric?
Which rock group has 4 guys who can't sing or play instruments?
Mount Rushmore.
Bingo, Lloyd's it. All right, that just subjects you to another one. You got that one right.
Oh,
What do you get when you pour root beer into a square cup?
The square root beer.
Jacob, you're 0 for 2, buddy. Sorry.
Oh,
something
Anybody
to do with
else?
a square root.
A square root.
What do you get when you pour root beer into a square cup? You get beer. You get it later. It is my pleasure to be your general evaluator. Root beer, you put it into a square cup. Square root is just beer.
Somebody else needs jokes next week.
That's the moral of the story.
Moving on.
I will be the general evaluator and I will evaluate the meeting from stem to stern, but in order to do a proper evaluation, I have a team and I'd like to introduce my team right now. We have 2 speeches. Lloyd is speaking and Christina is Lloyd's evaluator. What is your role tonight, Christina?
Thank you, Mr. General. I will be evaluating Lloyd's first speech in the evaluation and feedback path. In the motivational strategies path. The first speech is evaluation and feedback. Purpose of the practice of this project is for Lloyd to practice applying feedback and serve as a speech evaluator during a club meeting. Purpose of the speech is for the member to present a speech and receive feedback from the evaluator. That'd be me. The member will deliver a well-organized speech on any topic. Focus on the member's speaking style. Be sure to recommend improvements that the member can apply to the next speech. It can be humorous, informational, or any style the member chooses. And he will ask me to evaluate his second speech at a future meeting. I would encourage everyone, as you listen to his speech, to give notes on those things that Lloyd will be working on, that the speech is well organized. See if you can pick out the style he's using. Is it humorous, informational, or some other style? Give him your thoughts on those criteria when you write your evaluation for him, and I will share my thoughts when called upon to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Speaker number 2 is Jacob, and his evaluator is Rob Ted. Rob, what is your role entitled tonight?
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. This evening, Jacob is going to give his second speech. It's not related necessarily to a particular path and pathways. However, this is an evaluation and feedback speech. Again, everything that Christina shared with us about Lloyd's speech applies to Jacob's speech. I'm hoping that everyone will be able to give him further feedback, and I will give a summation of my evaluation at the end of the meeting. Back to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you, Rob. Our timer tonight is Vicky. What does your role entail, Vicky?
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. Tonight, I will be timing the speeches, table topics, and the evaluations. For our speeches, they're both 5 to 7 minutes. So at 5 minutes, you'll get the green. At 6, you'll get the yellow. And at 7, you'll get the red until you conclude. Table topics is 1 to 2. So you'll get 1, 1.5, and 2. And our evaluators will be speaking from 2 to 3 minutes. They will get the 2, 2.5, and 3. At the end of the meeting, I will give my report.
Thank you, timer Vicky. That was excellent. We have to figure out how to do that. Tonight, our grammarian is Kathleen. Kathleen, what is your role?
Thank you. Tonight I am the grammarian. My job is to listen for the stellar use of words that I know this group will be conducting tonight. I'm also looking for misuses of words. Lucky for you, I'm not as astute as, for example, Pat is in picking those up, but I will be listening. I also am charged with announcing the word of the day and counting how many times it's used. I am going to post it now in the chat. The word is altruistic, unselfishly concerned for or devoted to the welfare of others. It's an adjective. I thought it was perfect for this group since we are individually unselfishly concerned for and devoted to the welfare of others. Should be easy to use this word. Here is the use of the word in a quote. Ethics asks us to critically reflect on our judgments to determine the right thing to do. When Dr. Martin Luther King in 1963 sermon concluded that to be a good neighbor was to be altruistic, he asked us to be willingly obedient to unenforceable obligations. That is my job. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. A Martin Luther quote on Martin Luther King Day. I love it. That's very cool. Pat is stepping in to do the counting tonight for Selena. Pat, what does that entail?
Well, the counter looks at all of the hiccups in the natural flow of language, all those filler words that disrupt the flow and the understanding, things like well, so, like, but. When we repeat things, it's not a role that is characteristic by being altruistic in the way it looks at language. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. This time I will turn it back over to our toast, Mr. Brian.
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. Tonight, Lloyd Smith will be giving a speech on the meaning of knowledge, and specifically how we know what we believe we know is one of the central issues in the branch of philosophy called epistemology. It's a big problem, as Mark Twain explained when he said, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so." That quotation is pretty typical of his homespun, common sense way of viewing life, but it also perfectly describes an important area of research in cognitive psychology. This evening, Lloyd Smith will discuss that research for the first speech in the evaluation and feedback project for level 1 of his newest path, motivational strategies, Lloyd Smith and the Dunning-Kruger Effect. Please welcome Lloyd Smith.
Every one of us here has worked with or at least known someone who seems to live that Mark Twain quotation. They constantly have trouble or cause trouble because of what they don't know, even though they're very often sure that they do know it. Think of the hours you've probably spent over the years trying to convince somebody not to try to do something you know they can't do, and then clearing up the mess they caused by doing it anyway. Most people don't realize that there's a formal cause for this situation, the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is the cognitive bias in which people with low ability or knowledge at a task overestimate their ability or knowledge. There's a related opposite effect for high performers, their tendency to underestimate their skills. The Dunning-Kruger effect is usually measured by comparing self-assessment with objective performance. For example, the participants in a study may be asked to complete a quiz and then estimate how well they did. Their subjective self-assessment is then compared to how well they actually did. Whenever that's done as an experiment, the bottom quartile of performers tends to consistently see themselves as being part of the top 2 quartiles. In other words, the worst performers believe they are the best performers. The initial study into this was done in the late 1990s by 2 psychologists, David Dunning at the University of Michigan and Justin Kruger at New York University. Since then, numerous studies have been conducted across a wide range of tasks in fields such as business, politics, medicine, the military, driving, aviation, school exams, and even basic literacy, and they've all confirmed the effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is usually explained in terms of metacognitive abilities. Metacognition sounds complicated, but it's not. It's the process of thinking about one's own thinking, an awareness of one's own thought processes, and an understanding of the patterns behind them. The idea is that part of acquiring a skill, any skill, consists of learning to distinguish between good and bad performances of the skill. Since people with low skills have not yet acquired the discriminatory ability, they are unable to properly assess their own performance. This naturally leads them to believe that they're better than they are because they don't see the qualitative differences between their performances and good performances by others. That is, they lack the metacognitive ability to recognize their own incompetence. This is also sometimes called the dual burden account or the double burden of incompetence, since the burden of regular incompetence is paired with the burden of metacognitive incompetence. It's an unbeatable combination. It's usually combined with the thesis that metacognitive abilities are acquired as one progresses in gaining skills, but the metacognitive lack may hinder people from becoming better by hiding their flaws from them. This basically, in summary, explains how self-confidence can be higher for unskilled people than for people with average skills. Only the people with skills are aware of their flaws. Now, the question this raises is, does the Dunning-Kruger effect really matter in a practical sense? And the answer is yes, it does. because it can cause the affected people to make decisions that lead to bad consequences for them or other people. This is especially relevant for decisions that have long-term consequences. For example, it can lead poor performers into careers that they are just not suited to. On the other hand, high performers underestimating their skills might forego career opportunities that do match their skills in favor of less promising ones that are below their skill levels. If you think for a little bit, you can probably think of people who fit both of those categories: unsuited people who have jobs that they picked long ago, and people who are working well below their ability levels. The bad decisions can also have serious short-term effects, as when the overconfidence leads, for example, a pilot to try to fly a new airplane for which he or she lacks adequate training, or to engage in some flight maneuvers that are beyond their abilities. Emergency medicine is another area where the correct assessment of one's own skill levels and the risk of a treatment are crucially important. In fact, medical school supervisors are careful to watch their, I guess it would be residents, for that very problem. Now, oddly, there may be positive sides to the Dunning-Kruger effect too. Sometimes ignorance really is bliss. Overconfidence can lead people to experience their own situations more positively than they should, and may actually help them achieve even unrealistic goals. That's because they're not aware that the goals are unrealistic. Of course, the trick is to recognize overconfidence, and unfortunately, the Dunning-Kruger effect is our greatest barrier to doing just that. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Well, thank you, Lloyd. Please take a minute to type into the chat and direct your comments to Lloyd. Could we get a minute, please, timer?
Pat, you're sharing your screen. I don't know if you knew that or not.
It seems like that was a minute.
It was a minute. Sorry, I was trying to figure out what was going on with the share screen going on. So, yep, that has been a minute.
No worries, 1 second. Now let me introduce Jacob Town, and give me one moment to pull up the intro to his speech. Jacob's speech is entitled A Clean Break and is around 675 words. It is a reflective speech on the breakdown of a marriage. Welcome, Jacob Town.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Master Toastmaster. As he said, this speech is about a breakdown of a marriage, and it is personal and it is true. So just bear that in mind when I'm sharing it. So thank you. My aunt and uncle are separating. It came as neither a shock nor a surprise, but I was startled nonetheless when she told me last July. I had quietly watched the cracks in their marriage get deeper and deeper as the years had gone on, but I had never wanted to reach quite past that private partition of marriagedom to ask what was wrong. She told me on a park bench in Sutton Park in Cheney, Washington. It was a hot summer day, and our iced coffees were sweating in the heat, and my dog Darwin was panting underneath the table. I want to protect his privacy, she said firmly. And she lingered just a little while too long on the word his. There was a tension in her shoulders and a quiet discontent in her voice and a dip in her mouth from wearing a frown for too long. And I thought to myself, she really means this. And then I suddenly realized she's the one making this decision to separate. And after all of that, she still cared enough to protect his privacy. I think if it were up to him, he would probably carry on as they've always been. Him working, her at home. Him working, her with the kids. Him working, her with the dogs. But the thing is, he's no longer working, and neither is their marriage. I just don't know who I am anymore, Jacob, she said to me. I just can't tell you what it is that I'm doing. I don't know if I like basketball. I don't know if I like whiskey. I don't know if I like those things because I can't remember liking them before him. It's a personal philosophy question. I believe people are an amalgam of everyone and everything around them, that we pick up the habits and hobbies of those we love because we admire them. But there comes a point when you can't quite tell which is your hobby and which is theirs. And I don't know if you can tell the difference. Bottom line is, she says, that I'm not happy. And in order to be happy, I have to hurt somebody I care about deeply. I have to hurt somebody I made a life with for 30 years. She pauses and looks away and says, how do you reconcile that? There is a distant look in her eyes, and I realize that she is no longer talking to me. She is somewhere else, and I am bearing witness to a confession before some higher power. And whether it's the God of our shared Catholic background or something else entirely, I'm not quite sure. But she is no longer talking to me. Her question echoes in my mind, and I think about my own relationship and how easy it would be if Ron and I were to separate right now. Mine, mine, mine. Yours, yours, yours. We haven't been together long enough for things to become ours until we bought our first couch, until we bought our first TV, until we bought Darwin. Those things are undoubtedly ours because we bought this together. We did this together. We built this life together. As time goes on, the lines become so blurred that you can't quite tell where one thing starts and one other thing begins. And her question echoes in my mind. How do you reconcile that? She comes alive a little while later. My aunt does. I see the look in her eyes returning as she flashes a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. And she looks at her watch and says, oh my gosh, dear, look at the time. I really have to get going. I watch as she strides across the verdant green of Sutton Park. And as she makes her way to her car, I wave. A slender arm snakes its way out of the window and waves quickly before vanishing back into her white SUV. When I got home that night, letting Darwin in and saying hello to Ron, I sat at my writing desk trying to come up with something to say. I willed the words to come out of my mouth, to come out of my hands, to come out of my keys, anything, because something profound had just happened to me, and I wasn't sure what there was to say about it. I wasn't sure if there was anything for me to say about it. I had reached past the private partition of their marriage, and what I had seen scared me. I had gotten what I wanted, and I didn't want it. I thought to myself, what would the next 30 years look like for me? And honestly, I can't really say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Miss Timer, could we please get a moment to type in the chat for Jacob, please?
That's a minute.
Thank you, Madam Timer. At this time, I'd like to introduce our table topics master for the evening, and that would be Mr. Steve Schwind.
Thank you all. I always feel like it would be so great to be able to take that camera, a little viewfinder, and move it right down into the center of the monitor. I think that the computer people should start thinking about making a camera that sits right in the middle of the monitor. You can always tell everybody's looking at everything else, or the people that they're talking to, and it doesn't look like you're looking at the people who you're talking to. You know what I mean? If you don't, fine. Our topic tonight is art. Near and dear to my heart. Didn't mean to really make a rhyme out of that. Everybody here, except for John, has a role. That means everybody gets a turn. John, last week was your first meeting, right?
That's correct, Steve.
Yeah. But you have joined the club?
Not joined the club. I don't even know the process for joining the club.
Okay, that's fine. I didn't think so. You didn't get introduced as a guest. And so I thought, oh, maybe he just threw his money at us right away.
No, not yet.
Okay, but you're good with jumping in and giving it a go.
Yeah,
I'm not going to start with you.
I would move my camera, but I can't. I have like two screens on either side, so it's kind of an awkward camera position. But I'll try to.
No problem. Maybe you should see if the gal in the back there wants to come and join.
I don't think she wants to.
I'm going to dive into one of my bigger questions. I think the arts are always thought of in society as an important subject, and in the world of education should be a substantial or significant element of our growth in learning. It seems that it's so often written off early in the game when the budget requires a little trimming in the educational world. Eric, what do you think about the idea that art should be front and center, or is it a little academic or incidental?
Who did you call on?
Eric Stepper.
Okay. I am on it from both camps. When I was younger, I thought it was a waste of money, quite frankly. And one of the big wastes of money was when they had this grassy knoll at the post office. Remember that? He brought in the mounds of dirt into a big mound, and then they had to mow it. And who's the cat that's, I mean, you had to get repelling gear to mow the thing safely. And then it kept getting vandalized, so then you had to put a fence around it. What the heck, this is going from bad to worse. But I have since found out, since my kids have gone away, and I've discovered the arts like poetry and painting and writing, that it does serve a great purpose. You go down to Las Vegas and you go into the casinos, and it's mind-blowing. It is just really ethereal, and you see Chihuly's big masterpieces hanging from there. It really does something for you. It causes you to pause and reflect. And I can now see the importance of arts. And I am so pleased that this city, Wenatchee, is emphasizing the arts, and they have art walks, and they have people taking on art projects and galleries and emphasizing the arts. And I just really enjoy it. And I fully am geared up to take some art classes at the college this next quarter. So I do see the art being very important. I know it's going to be a budget cut, but they seem like to keep bringing it back, and I'm thrilled about that. And I hope everybody else gets on the art bandwagon. And if you don't see arts as important, let's have a conversation about it. I'd like to hear why and why not. Thank you, Steve.
Great job, Eric. Thank you. Christina, I know you've done some art, your husband, and probably just on your own. What does art do for your soul? How does it make you feel when you're creating art?
Thank you, Steve. I was creating some art just yesterday, as a matter of fact. Rather than watching the football game, which tends to get me my shoulders up here, I got out my alcohol ink box and a couple of projects I've been working on, set everything up on the island in the kitchen, and had myself a great old time. The thing I like particularly about alcohol ink is that it creates itself by adding color and then adding alcohol, then other colors, using markers, letting it blend, taking advantage of how it flows, adding more. It develops its own picture, which I appreciate. I don't have patience for things like drawing. That is not my thing. I tried art classes when I was a kiddo, and I would rather have gone and fed the horse in the yard next to where we were having art classes than to have sat there by that easel trying to do something other than stick figures. However, I have discovered alcohol ink. I thoroughly enjoy it. Eric went and got a couple of the things that I have been working on. It's a little bit reflective there. There's one side, there's the other. And this one in more in the blues and greens. I just encourage you to play around with different types of art and creativity. I feel like in every one of us, there's a seed. We just need to water and see what happens. Thank you.
Love it. Great job, Christina. Thank you. And I don't know where your artistic bent lies, but would you find yourself attracted to participating in a sip and paint class? I'm sure you've heard of them. And if you did, you have an idea of that striking you as an entertaining activity, particularly because you get to sip while you're painting?
Thank you, Mr. Table Topics Master. No, that wouldn't appeal to me. I have a very narrow skill set, and art is definitely not one of them. However, I believe I've spoken about this in Toastmasters before. The best class I took in all of my college curriculum was Art 101. And I begrudgingly went into it. It was in the AA portion of the degree program where you have to take 15 credits of humanities, 15 credits of natural sciences, and 15 credits of social sciences. Well, lo and behold, the only time slot I had available and the only class offered was Art 101, and I went into it kicking and screaming and dragging and gnashing my teeth. Art 101 was nothing like I expected it to be. I expected to have a paintbrush in my mouth and, you know, making swirls on a, I don't even know what you call it, the background, the egg tempura egg background. None of that was the class at all. We were given a brilliantly written textbook. The instructor was incredibly knowledgeable about art. He walked us through all the genres of art. I came into the class knowing nothing about art and left with a lifelong, wonderful appreciation for art. And I've noticed when I'm out traveling, I do gravitate towards those areas that are offered in different cities to see what they have to offer. Definitely adds value to society. The artists have talents that I appreciate greatly, of which I have none of. Thank you, Mr. Table Topics Master.
Thank you. That was insightful. This gentleman turned down Walt Disney's offer to invest in the creation of Disneyland back in inception of that fun little venue. Later on, he realized that maybe there was something happening there because he had some involvement in the creation and realized that he should pursue some opportunity to benefit financially, and asked Mr. Disney if he could have the photography rights for the first 10 years of Disneyland's existence, should it make it that far, which he was given the consent to do so. The concession was given to him and he profited very nicely. He pursued on with other endeavors throughout his life, writing books and hosting TV shows and playing in a couple of TV shows. Pat, what do you think about the definition of an artist for Art Linkletter?
Art Linkletter. Now, I'm old enough to remember when Art Linkletter used to have a number of shows. In fact, I was on one of his shows when I was living in Southern California. I think that someone who is in communication, who can reach out to a large cross-section of society, is truly an artist. I think they're an artist in their interpersonal communication skills, their ability to infuse humor, their sensitivity to others. So although I wouldn't put art in the same category as Rembrandt or a great poet, he was a pioneer in the early days of, I don't really want to call them quiz shows, I think I'd call them personal interest shows. Those were the early days of television. People were learning. His personality was warm and friendly and engaging. Certainly those are qualities of an artist, particularly a master of interpersonal skills. So I have to say I would characterize Art Linkletter, of all people, as truly an artist in the realm of reaching out to people and interpersonal communication. Thank you.
Great answer. Jackson Pollock was an interesting artist, taking huge paint cans and putting them on a pendulum that would swing across the canvas and leave marks, or he would stand across the room and throw paint at the canvas, creating splotched images. John, does that guy strike you as someone who truly has an artistic flair, or did he benefit from a dramatic presentation to the world?
Thanks, Steve. I'm glad I got asked about Jackson Pollock. So in my opinion, I think that is art. And I think So can you repeat your question as far as dramatic presentation? I think that's what you said at the end.
The question is, do you perceive his spontaneous creation of freely splashing paint onto canvas as the epitome of an artist, or did he benefit somehow through his dramatic presence and presentation of his craft?
So I think he definitely benefited from his presence and his character. But I absolutely think that what he does is art. And I think I believe it's art because it's something that, and I'll use this as a kind of example. My aunt is this really well-known painter, and she can paint things perfectly and it'll look exactly like a photograph. And I consider that a skill, but I don't necessarily look at her paintings and say it's art. I look at it because it's something that I can see, whereas Jackson Pollock is something that I can't imagine, and it's unique, and it makes my mind kind of wander and wonder, and it's really some of the things I appreciate about art is how it can expand the way I think and look at the world. So that is my answer.
All right. Thank you, John. Keith, have you done much in the way of art?
My question is, have I done much in the way of art?
I'm asking the question. I've got a little bit more to it.
Okay,
Okay,
go ahead.
let me just finish the question.
Yep.
If you have an artistic and you participate and pursue artistic activities, is there a particular message that you hope to convey through your art?
Okay. Well, thank you, Steve. That is an interesting question for me to think about. I seem to have this innate ability to have to know that it's going to turn out the way it's supposed to turn out. I can't just free fall and just draw something. I'm very good at if I have instructions that I need to follow. That's why crafts work well for me, because you have all these pieces, you put them together. My family bought me the diamond dot paintings this Christmas, and I'm enjoying them because all I have to do is take these little dots and place them where they tell me to place them. And then at the end, it is this gorgeous project. Whereas if they were to say, here's these little dots, create a masterpiece, I wouldn't know where to begin. However, I am learning a new art form that my friend is teaching me, where you take what they are calling acrylic pour paint, and you take these and you layer them, and they just create this wonderful looking thing. And no matter how many times you pour, you would never be able to create the same one over again because of just how the process works. And I'm really enjoying that because I get to choose colors that work well together and create something that I didn't know I could do. And I'm now fascinated with creating that way. Back to you, Steve.
Awesome. We're really close. I'd love to stick one more in here if you guys think we have time for it. John Michael Bisquat, I don't know exactly how to pronounce that last name, Biscat, died at the ripe old age of 27. He lived in the Manhattan area on the Lower East Side. It was a dicey little neighborhood. And he was an angry person, I think, and his art came from a really emotional place. He did amazing stuff, and his family is benefiting greatly from what he created. He actually became a represented artist in various museums while he was still alive. And after his demise, I believe, after he died, he sold a piece of his art sold for $110 $6,500,000. Became the highest paid American artist as a result of that sale, posthumously, I believe. His emotion comes from or his art comes from that deep emotional place. Yes, I'm almost answering my question. Kathleen, do you feel like emotion is a deep? You look like are you not happy with in pick?
No, I'm good. You're cutting in and out, so I think I got the gist of it.
Okay. Is emotion a really significant element of an artist's success, or does marketing come into play?
Thank you for that question. I have a couple of thoughts on this. I would say, yes, marketing comes into play. I would back up a little bit further, though, and say that whoever spent the $110 billion on that painting could have been more altruistic by taking it and putting it someplace where everybody could enjoy it on display. Why would that be good? This gets back to your question of emotion. I have not one iota of artistic ability in the way art is traditionally defined. Painting, drawing, ceramics, performing arts. I have none. However, I really enjoy art because it creates an emotion. I don't really give a fig about the emotion that the artist had when they were creating it. What I care about is what is the emotion that I have when I'm experiencing it. If we go back to Jackson Pollock, I've spent some time standing in front of Jackson Pollock original paintings in museums of modern art thinking, I don't get it. It doesn't create any emotion whatsoever. Nothing. Hey, it's maybe a nice color. If there's no emotion produced in me from the artwork, it's not good art to me. Luckily, I get to define that for myself. My favorite art right now are local artists like Steve Schwinn, but also other area artists in the Northwest. And I have a hobby now of trying to collect some of their artwork because I think we have fabulous artworks here. And when I look at these pieces, they create emotion. I feel an emotion when I'm looking at them. Either it's the beauty of an area, it's the beauty of the colors, it's the interesting way that things were put together. All of those things create an emotion. And once I have the emotion, to me, that's art. In response, yes, marketing is important. Do I care about the emotion of the artist? No, not at all. I just care whether it creates an emotion in me because then it's art.
Awesome. Great answer. Wish we had more time. I'd love to have kept going. I'm going to return the meeting back to our Toastmaster, Brian, to wrap up. Thank you so much. Great answers.
Thank you, Steve, for the great table topic questions. And now I'll turn the meeting over to our General Evaluator, Eric Stepper. And I apologize, I have to leave. My phone is dying.
I got you covered.
You've been a trooper.
Drive
Thank
safe.
you.
Literally.
You get the Intrepid Toastmaster of the Night Award. I will now call on my team. I have a great team and I've enjoyed working with them. It's a very altruistic team because I'm not paying them. They're just doing this for the love of it. The first one up would be our evaluator of Lloyd's speech, Christina Stepper. Christina, will you give your evaluation, please?
Yes, I will, and thank you. I appreciate the altruistic comments from our general evaluator. The Dunning-Kruger Effect. Lloyd, great eye contact. Your gestures were good. Unlike mine last week, they were above the bottom of the screen. Vocal variety was good. Clarity was good. I like that after sharing terms that we might not be familiar with, you said, for example, several times, which helped us digest the term and get some clarity there. I liked ignorance is bliss. Your speech was informative and educational. It clearly held the audience's attention. Everyone was glued to their screen, listening to your talk. It was well organized. It flowed smoothly. Showcased your knowledge and your passion for the subject as well. I will say it was a tough one for me to evaluate because the context was quite intricate and complex. When I was focusing on evaluating your presentation style, I missed part of the content, excuse me. So I was kind of trying to catch up. One suggestion is, could you think of a story that would demonstrate the Dunning-Kruger effect? Perhaps something from your years as a teacher or as a debate coach, something that could be shared toward the beginning of the speech that would allow us a little more time to wrap our heads around the concept of the Dunning-Kruger effect that might help us then throughout the rest of the speech to be able to see the application of that in different scenarios. All in all, a great speech. I really hope you do it again and repeat it so I can focus more on the content next time and a little less on the aspects of your presentation. Again, your speech giving skills are extraordinary. I always enjoy it and do look forward to the next time we get to hear this. Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you, Christina. Rob, will you please give us your evaluation of Jacob's speech?
I would be more than happy to, Mr. General Evaluator. When I chose this role this evening, it was because I wasn't sure what to expect from Jacob. He always does the unexpected. Hopefully, because I knew I was going to be over my head in evaluating his speech, hopefully the Dunning-Kruger effect will not impact him on his future speeches. However, because of my altruistic personality, I wanted to take on this challenge for him. Jacob, you are a natural. This was a very personal story to you. I don't know if you were reading any notes. I could not detect that whatsoever. You were so calm and collected in your delivery. It was incredible. I hope you will do this speech again. I know that it probably pains you to do a speech about your aunt and uncle or about your aunt. However, it was so natural. I was thoroughly amazed. Your use of gestures, the descriptive use of language, you could tell you were emotional, but you kept everything in check and you used pauses to great effect. Well done. The lighting is great. I know that that was important, that you were exercising some of the feedback that you got from your previous speech. Well done. There are a couple things that I would like you to consider going forward. I know that in this era, when we're still doing Zoom meetings, we tend not to stand and give speeches. However, there will come a time when we will meet in person. It will be important for us to give speeches standing and not sitting. At the beginning of your speech, you wanted to apologize in case you got emotional. That's understandable. However, you don't need to apologize in advance before giving a speech. It tends to diminish the impact of the speech and there's no reason to apologize in advance. Everyone who is receiving the message knows that it is something personal and emotions may come to the top. You did a great job. I hope that you will do the speech again. I really appreciated it, and I hope to hear more wonderful speeches from you in the future. Well done, Jacob.
Thank you, Rob. Vicki, how did we do on timing?
All right, thank you very much. Lloyd, your speech came in at 5:54. Jacob, your speech was 5:23. For table topics, Eric, 2:05, Christina, 2:08, Brian was 1:48, Pat, 1:27, John, almost a minute, came in at 54 seconds. I was 1:44 and Kathleen was 2:08. And for our speech evaluations, Christina was 2:53 and Rob was 2:53. I don't know how you guys planned it, but great job. Oh, and I wanted to share, since I'm really quick, this was my pour. My last pour of our.
Oh,
Nice.
Back to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
thank you, Vicki. Kathleen, what does the grammarians report look like?
Thank you very much. We had many pearls today. I won't be able to get to all of them. I'll start with Pat, who referred to our ahs as hiccups in the natural flow of language. Very nice. Love that visual that created. Lloyd, a number of notable statements. I'll just mention a few. You referenced the worst performers believe they are the best. Ouch. Only people with skills are aware of their flaws. Jacob, you're a very good writer. You had quite a few notable phrases. I'll mention just a couple of them. You said private partition of marriagedom. That was very interesting. The iced coffees were sweating in the heat. Created a real visual picture. And you referenced your aunt, flashes a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Artistically written. Pat mentioned anyone who can reach out to a large cross-section of society is a great artist. I thought that that was an excellent statement. Steve, you asked someone, you know what I mean? And then you said, if you don't, that's fine. We'll end with Christina. First of all, Christina, thank you for introducing me to alcohol ink art. I had never heard of that. Very interesting. You said in each person, there's a seed we need to water and see what happens. I liked that very much. I have only one suggestion, and that is for Jacob. Check your transitions. It could be my hearing, but there was a point at the beginning of your speech when you talked about your dog. And then you referenced his privacy. And it took me a few seconds because I thought you were talking about the dog's privacy. And you were talking about, I think, your uncle. But you might just want to look at that and see about that. Word of the day, altruistic. Pat, Eric, Kathleen, Christina, Rob, I may have missed others. I learned something about being grammarian that I'll share for others. I never looked at what our subject was today. And this was not a great word for the subject or the topic of art. Note to self, in the future, it might be a good idea for grammarians to look at what the subject is. I never look until the meeting. I'll rectify that problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Pat, how'd we do on counting?
Okie dokie. Rob had one and, Christina had one and, Steve had two ums, two ands, and repeated extended pauses that tended to disrupt the flow that kind of affected our ability to understand, aside from the technological glitches that intruded as well. Vicky had 2 ands. Kathleen was perfect and pure. Lloyd had 3 ums, 1 but, and 1 hesitation in his speech. Brian had 1 he's not here to get that feedback. Eric had 1 so, 1 and then, and 6 ands. Jacob had 1 1 but, and 8 ands. John had 6 ums, 1 so, and 2 buts. So much for the hiccups of this evening.
Thank you, John, for out-anding me.
Yeah, I'm in the right place, I guess. We can work on that Dunning-Kruger effect and I can be informed about my speaking skills. This is great.
I enjoyed this meeting immensely. We get together as a group and we figure it out. I would like to mention a couple of things. Kathleen stood with her table topics. I appreciated that, and Lloyd stood for his speech. We need to get better about that and trying to do that. Brian got here on his iPhone and just powered through that. Wow, how intrepid that was. And Steve oftentimes will be on his phone to make a meeting too. He's in transition. Jacob and Vicky have Toastmaster logos on their screen, plus they do the colors for the timing. And that's very, very snappy. We could all learn from that. Steve, there were great in-depth topics, table topics, and I enjoyed that. Overall, great meeting. We run a little long, but I enjoyed it, and I will give it back to our pro tem, Rob.
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. Anyone have any final comments for the good of the order? Hearing none, I look forward to seeing everybody next week. Have a great week.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.